A woman in navy scrubs stood alone on the runway, arms stretched wide like a defiant statue. Behind her, a human chain of 50 travelers locked arms, refusing to move. A Boeing 737 screamed overhead, forced to abort landing. Alarms blared, guns drawn, cameras rolling. "This isn't about me anymore," Dr. Naomi Carter said into her phone, live to millions. "It's about every silent voice crushed by the system." Before we show you how this impossible moment unfolded, ask yourself, how far would you go when dignity is stripped from you at 30,000 feet? Dr. Naomi Carter adjusted the sleeves of her navy blazer as she stepped into the first-class cabin of United Airlines Flight 2765, bound for New York City. The leather seats gleamed under the ambient lighting, and a faint aroma of citrus-scented disinfectant lingered. She placed her carry-on bag in the overhead compartment with practiced precision, slid into seat 2A, and exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. 48 years old, former military surgeon, now one of the top neurosurgeons on the East Coast. Naomi had long since grown used to being the only black woman in spaces like these. She was en route to perform an emergency brain surgery on the teenage son of New York's governor. Time was critical. Every hour mattered. She crossed her legs and opened her medical briefing folder, but a movement caught her eye. A flight attendant, young, tall, and blonde, with a neat chignon and surgically neutral smile, began offering pre-takeoff drinks to the passengers. She leaned in toward a white man in 2C and handed him a glass of champagne with a practiced, "Enjoy your flight, sir." Naomi raised her hand gently. "Excuse me, may I have some water, please?" The attendant didn't pause. Her name tag read Heather. She walked past Naomi without so much as a glance, continuing to distribute drinks to other passengers, all of them white. Naomi blinked. Maybe she didn't hear me. Giving her the benefit of the doubt, Naomi waited. Heather completed her round and returned down the aisle, passing Naomi again. Naomi made eye contact this time. "Excuse me, could I please get a bottle of water?" Heather's smile faltered ever so slightly. "We're preparing for departure, ma'am. I'll come back around." But she didn't. Naomi watched as Heather leaned over into seat 1B, laughing softly with another passenger, handing him a glass of sparkling water. Then seat 3C, then 4A. It had now been 15 minutes. The cabin was nearly full. Naomi sat quietly, her mouth dry. She pressed the service button above her head. It blinked orange. Nobody came. Then it happened. Heather returned down the aisle, pushing the drink cart again. Without a word, she extended a paper cup of coffee toward Naomi. The moment Naomi reached for it, Heather's wrist tilted. Hot liquid splashed directly onto Naomi's lap, soaking into her navy pants. Naomi gasped as the heat seared her skin. Oh, Heather echoed, without inflection. "I'm so sorry," she added mechanically, already turning toward the next passenger. Naomi inhaled sharply, trying to keep her composure. "Could I get some napkins, please?" But Heather was gone. Naomi stood up slightly, dabbing at the spill with the sleeve of her blazer. The burning sting of hot coffee throbbed against her thigh. Across the aisle, a white businessman in an expensive-looking suit looked up from his tablet and frowned, not at Heather, but at Naomi. "Some of us are trying to relax," he muttered. Naomi's jaw tightened. "I was burned," she replied softly. "Maybe next time don't overreact," he added, returning to his screen. The cabin felt tighter, smaller. Passengers nearby studiously avoided eye contact. No one said a word. No one offered help. Naomi sat back down, lips pressed together. She felt the heat radiate up her neck, not from the coffee, but from humiliation. She reached into her purse and gently tapped her backup phone, an older model. Long battery life, no SIM card. Then slipped it into the magazine pocket in front of her, angling it just so. It began recording. Not because she wanted revenge, not even because she hoped it would help her, but because she'd learned, long ago in combat zones and in corporate boardrooms, that truth was often denied unless it was documented. She stared out the window. On the tarmac, ground crew moved like ants, directing luggage and fueling operations. She could have caused a scene, could have demanded to speak with a supervisor, could have threatened legal action. Instead, she sat still. Because dignity, she believed, was sometimes best preserved in silence. Because she knew this wasn't just about water, or coffee, or even Heather. This was about being told, without words, that she didn't belong here. That her presence was tolerated, not welcomed. That in the eyes of the Heather Baileys of the world, a black woman in seat 2A was always going to be the exception. And not in a good way. The cabin speakers crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a short delay before pushback due to runway congestion. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Naomi exhaled slowly. Her thigh still stung, but it was manageable now. Heather passed by again. Naomi pressed the service button a second time. Still nothing. As the delay stretched, Naomi glanced around. Not a single passenger had intervened. No one had said, "Are you okay?" No one had challenged what had just happened. That, more than the scalding coffee, burned the most. She slid her hand back into her pocket and gently pressed a second button on her backup phone, saving the recording so far. Then, she leaned her head back and closed her eyes, bracing herself for whatever came next. The pressure in Naomi's chest had just begun to subside when the presence of two uniformed men shattered the fragile stillness. "Ma'am," one said curtly, leaning in over her seat. "We need you to come with us." Naomi opened her eyes slowly, blinking up at the man. One wore a transportation security uniform. The other had no badge, but the earpiece and blazer screamed, "Plainclothes Federal." His jaw was clenched. "What's this about?" she asked, voice calm. "We've received complaints about your behavior," the TSA officer said. "You've been disruptive." Naomi's eyebrows lifted. "Disruptive?" She glanced around. No one looked at her, not even Heather, now at the galley, who watched from the corner of her eye. The plainclothes agent stepped in. "We don't want to escalate the situation, Dr. Carter." So they knew her name. "Then let me be clear," Naomi said evenly. "I am a medical doctor, a neurosurgeon. I am en route to New York to perform a life-saving surgery on a minor patient, specifically the son of Governor Jonathan Meyer." She reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out her hospital credentials, and handed it to the agent. He took it, but didn't glance down. "I understand," he said. "But we still need you to come with us for questioning." "For what reason?" "For the safety and comfort of the other passengers," the TSA officer said. "We've had complaints." Naomi turned slowly to face the cabin. Still, no one looked up. They were pretending she didn't exist. She inhaled. "Then let me speak with the captain. He needs to be informed this flight is removing a critical care surgeon from a mission of medical urgency." "That won't be necessary," the agent said. "Please gather your things." Naomi stood, slowly, deliberately. She refused to let her hands shake. As she reached for her carry-on, the TSA agent took her elbow firmly. "That won't be necessary either," he said. "We'll secure your belongings." She turned sharply to face him. "You don't need to touch me." He didn't let go. The walk down the aisle was excruciating. Her burned thigh ached with every step, but it was nothing compared to the sting of shame. She passed the man who had scolded her earlier. His eyes were now back on his tablet. No one said a word. Not a whisper of protest, just a few stolen glances, pitying or indifferent. Heather stood by the front galley, arms crossed, watching her exit with thinly veiled satisfaction. The air outside the plane was sticky with Atlanta heat. They didn't take her to the general terminal. Instead, they veered left, toward a separate corridor leading to a private hallway. Naomi's eyes narrowed. This wasn't protocol. "Where are you taking me?" "To an interview room," the agent replied. "Why?" she demanded. "For further questioning," he repeated, without elaboration. Naomi remained silent the rest of the walk. Her military training kicked in. Breathing even, heart steady. Never show fear. The room they brought her to was small and cold. A folding metal chair sat opposite a laminate table. One camera in the corner blinked red. The walls were a pale institutional green. No windows, no clock. The door locked behind her. Seconds ticked by. or maybe minutes. Time had lost shape. Finally, a woman entered. Airport operations badge clipped to her chest, tablet in hand. She was mid-40s, polished, with an air of scripted neutrality. "Dr. Carter," she began. "I'm Nancy Kim, manager of incident response for United Airlines." Naomi said nothing. "There was a report of concerning behavior on board. Our staff alleges you were aggressive with a flight attendant." Naomi folded her hands calmly on the table. "I requested water. I was ignored. I requested again. I was scalded with coffee. I asked for napkins and was refused. At no point did I raise my voice or make threats." Kim didn't flinch. "Other passengers reportedly felt uncomfortable. I'm not responsible for their discomfort with my presence," Naomi replied. "And I suggest your airline be extremely careful in how it defines aggressive when referring to a black woman asserting basic rights." Kim hesitated. "We take all reports seriously." Naomi leaned forward slightly. "And what about my report? That I was injured, humiliated, and removed from an essential medical mission? What's your protocol for that?" There was a beat of silence. "I'm not at liberty to speak to that," Kim said. "Then get me someone who is," Naomi snapped. "I understand you're frustrated," Kim replied, voice level. "But please know, we are committed to maintaining a safe environment for all travelers." Naomi's laugh was short and humorless. "Spare me the script." She stood, wincing at the heat from her thigh. "Where is my phone?" "For security purposes. We've retained it temporarily." "You had no right." "It will be returned after we've cleared this matter," Kim said. Naomi clenched her jaw. The room felt smaller. "Where's my luggage?" "Already loaded on the plane. Your items will proceed to New York." Naomi stared at her. "So my belongings can fly, but I can't." Kim didn't answer. The door opened again. A male security officer entered, different from the earlier ones, broader, older. His name tag read Wilson. He smirked slightly, as if the whole thing amused him. "She giving you trouble?" he asked Kim. Kim stood. "We're done here." Naomi's fists curled at her sides. "I need to call the hospital," she said, forcing calm back into her voice. "The patient's surgery is scheduled in 6 hours." Kim paused. "You may use the landline, briefly." Naomi sat back down and dialed Boston Memorial. Dr. Lydia Sanchez, her surgical partner, picked up. "Lydia, I've been pulled off the flight. I was removed." "What? Why? We've been prepping all morning. Governor Meyer is here, pacing like a lion." "I asked for water," Naomi said. "That's it. It escalated." There was silence. Then, "Naomi, they're stalling. Jacob's vitals are dropping. We need you." "I know. I'm trying. Tell them who you are." "They don't care." The line buzzed with tension. "We'll delay as long as we can. But hours. Naomi, he might not make it through the night without decompression." "I understand." Naomi hung up. Her hands trembled now, despite her efforts. Wilson leaned in as Kim left. "Next time, just sit quiet and enjoy the flight, sweetheart. Cooperative passengers don't end up here." Naomi looked at him, face unreadable. Inside, something shifted. Not rage, not panic. A deep, steady resolve. They had made a mistake. They had underestimated her, and they had no idea what she was about to do. The cold metal chair beneath Naomi's thighs felt like punishment. Her coffee-stained pants clung to her skin, now dried, stiff, and sticky. A dull ache pulsed up her leg where the burn was beginning to blister beneath the fabric. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed like a mosquito in a quiet room, offering no comfort, only reminder. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. Across the room, Officer Wilson leaned against the wall, arms folded, thumbing his phone like a bored teenager. His radio crackled intermittently with voices from airport security. "Got 2 off gate 12. Family of 4 flagged at screening. Middle Eastern, maybe Pakistani. Roger that. Secondary screening engaged." Naomi stared at the wall, the voices cutting sharp lines across her thoughts. Her body was still, but her mind raced, calculating and cataloging. Outside the door, a second set of voices approached. Male, casual, unaware of her proximity to the sound. "Yeah, that's 5 so far today." Plus the lady from 2A. That makes 6. She was first class? Black, first class, and vocal. That's always an easy pull. Well, that's quota for the shift. Supervisors will be happy. Naomi's breath caught. Quota. It didn't sound like slang. It sounded like policy. Her hand, resting quietly in her lap, curled into fists. So this wasn't just about Heather. Not just one racist flight attendant on a power trip. This was systemic, deliberate. The first-class cabin had been the stage, but the play had been rehearsed long before she boarded that plane. Quota. Naomi blinked slowly, her pulse rising with a wave of fury that simmered just below the surface. She didn't scream, didn't flinch. Instead, she reached slowly into the inner lining of her blazer, where a small seam had been carefully unstitched months ago for just such a purpose. Her backup phone. Not the one security had confiscated, not the burner she'd used earlier. This one was older, slimmer, and unregistered. Military issue from her time as a field surgeon in Kandahar. No SIM, no signal. But it had a camera, and it still worked. She palmed it beneath the table and activated voice command. "Record audio and video," she whispered into the corner of her lap. The light blinked once. She slid the device under the edge of the table. Camera angled discreetly at the room, then leaned back. Her face remained neutral. Her mind burned. The door opened again. Nancy Kim returned, this time without the smug detachment. Her hair was slightly frizzed, her brow tight. Behind her, a younger man in a navy suit stood with a tablet. He didn't introduce himself. "Dr. Carter," Nancy began. Her tone clipped. "I want to assure you that we're looking into your concerns. I want my belongings," Naomi said, cutting her off. "Those will be returned upon completion of our investigation. I want my phone. We're within our rights to retain it for the moment." Naomi smiled, lips pressed tight. "And yet, I'm the one being treated as a threat." Nancy hesitated. "We're asking for your cooperation." "Do I look like I'm resisting?" Kim didn't answer. She turned to the man behind her and gave a subtle nod. The man stepped forward. "We've reviewed your record, Dr. Carter. Former Army surgeon, Silver Star for valor, currently Chief of Neurosurgery at Boston Memorial. That's impressive." Naomi said nothing. He continued, "Which makes this situation unfortunate. You understand we have to respond to any perceived disruption on our aircraft." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Perceived? That's the key word, isn't it?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Tell me," she asked calmly, "what's your internal definition of disruption? Is it based on decibel levels, physical behavior, or the comfort of your staff when they see a black woman asking for equal service?" Neither of them responded. "I'm scheduled to operate on a 17-year-old boy tonight," she continued. "His condition is deteriorating. Every hour counts, and instead of flying, I'm being interrogated in a storage closet." Kim straightened. "You're not under interrogation, you're being held for review. Against my will. Temporarily." Naomi stood. Slowly. "Then let me be clear. The next person who tells me I'm being held temporarily without access to my personal belongings, without a phone call, and without legal counsel is going to meet my attorney and the governor of New York on live television." Kim blinked. The young man looked startled. Naomi took a step forward, her voice low and sharp. "I don't need to yell. I don't need to curse. But you're going to remember this moment for the rest of your career." They retreated without another word. The door shut, clicked. Naomi waited until she heard their footsteps disappear down the hall, then retrieved the phone from under the table. The device had caught everything. Clear audio, stable video, and just enough of the voices from outside to capture the words she couldn't stop hearing. "Quota." She tapped the screen. "Compress file. Share via Bluetooth." From her shoe, she pulled a second device, an NFC beacon used to override restricted networks. One tap, and the file zipped silently to her other phone. Still active, still hidden in the lining of her purse. She opened a blank message and typed a single line. "Sent off flight 2765. They said I hit quota. Full video attached." She hit send. The contact name at the top read, Erica Carter, SIS, her sister. Award-winning investigative journalist, champion of civil rights, and the last person United Airlines wanted in their headlines. Naomi sat back, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of her lips. They had no idea what storm was coming. The moment Naomi heard the lock click, she moved. She'd been timing the guards. There was a pattern. Wilson took his break at the top of every hour, leaving the outer door momentarily unmanned. And the hallway camera nearest the isolation room panned on a 6-second loop. She had exactly 4 seconds of blind time. She stood, brushing dust from her sleeves, and reached into the lining of her blazer. Her old military ID, laminated and weather-worn, still bore the seal of the Department of Defense and the faded letters, MAJ, N. Carter, MedCorp. It had gotten her out of worse. She approached the door, knees steady despite the adrenaline. From outside, she heard the hum of a vending machine and the dull static of a radio. She knocked once, then twice. Footsteps. A pause. Then a guard's voice. "Yeah?" Naomi raised her voice. "I was told I need medical clearance to stay. I'm feeling faint. I'm a doctor, I can assess myself, but I need access to the staff lounge. Or a first aid station." Silence. Then the lock turned. The door opened 2 inches. Naomi moved faster than she thought her legs would allow. She slipped through before the guard registered, flashing the ID with one hand and pressing her other into his shoulder, pivoting past him down the narrow hallway. "Hey, stop!" But she was already down the ramp, turning left into the service corridor that ran beneath Concourse B. The space was industrial, all concrete and fluorescent glare, smelling of jet fuel and detergent. She ran. Her footsteps echoed against the walls until she heard a different rhythm, softer, slower. Ahead, a man in a gray janitorial uniform was mopping the floor, earbuds in, swaying slightly to music only he could hear. Naomi slowed, panting, and raised a hand. "Sir, please, I need help." The man turned, late 50s, with salt and pepper stubble and calloused hands. His badge read, Darnell Robinson. He looked at her with tired, perceptive eyes. "You're that doctor, aren't you?" he said slowly, pulling out his earbuds. "The one they pulled off 2765. Naomi blinked. "You saw that?" He nodded. "Word gets around fast in these tunnels." "I need to disappear for a bit," she said. "Just until I can get in touch with someone, somewhere private." Darnell studied her for a long beat. Then, without a word, he set his mop against the wall and motioned for her to follow. They weaved through a maze of maintenance halls, ducked under security rails, and past stacks of industrial supplies. After 5 minutes, Darnell swiped a keycard and pushed open a battered steel door. Inside was a break room, linoleum floors, old vending machines, 2 plastic tables, and a fridge covered in faded Union stickers. It was empty. "Sit," he said. "Water's cold. Don't drink the coffee, trust me." Naomi collapsed into a chair, breathing hard. Darnell grabbed a bottle from the fridge and placed it in front of her. She drank greedily, throat raw with thirst. "Why are you helping me?" she asked between gulps. He shrugged. "You're not the first. You just happen to be the one who finally pushed back." Naomi raised an eyebrow. Darnell sat across from her, folding his hands. "I've been working here 15 years, seen more than I wanted, but for the last 3, I've been keeping records. Me and a few others. Records, photos, videos, logs of who gets stopped, who gets pulled from lines, what gets flagged. We started calling ourselves the Silent Wing." He chuckled. "Not very original, but it stuck." Naomi leaned forward. "You're telling me there's a network of employees who are tired of watching good people get humiliated for the color of their skin?" "Yeah, and we've been waiting for someone like you." Naomi exhaled. A strange mix of exhaustion and hope welled in her chest. He continued. "We've got baggage handlers, gate agents, even a couple pilots. They're ready to talk, and..." He paused. "They've been preparing something big." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Darnell stood, opened a battered locker in the corner, and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts, emails, spreadsheets, scanned documents. One showed a chart titled Cabin Profile Balancing, Q2 Targets. Another was an internal memo from United's regional director reminding staff to monitor first-class demographic distribution for passenger comfort. Naomi's stomach turned. How long have you had this? Years. But we never had a face. A moment. He leaned in. Until you. She ran a hand through her curls. Even if we go public, they'll spin it. Isolated incident, misunderstanding, overreaction. Maybe. Darnell grinned. Unless it goes live while every camera in the country is pointed right here. Naomi blinked. Why would they be? Darnell's smile widened. Because in 3 hours, CEO Thomas Garrison is landing at ATL for a press conference. Big PR rollout. New customer excellence initiative. Media outlets, investor reps. The works. Naomi stared at him. Twist. So, let me get this straight, she said slowly. The CEO of the airline that just dragged me off a plane is about to give a speech about how great their customer service is? Yep. And the press will be here? Already setting up in Terminal D? She leaned back in her chair, laughter bubbling unexpectedly from her throat. It was short, bitter, but real. This might actually work. Darnell nodded. But we can't do it alone. You got anyone on the outside? Naomi pulled out her backup phone and showed him the last message sent. He whistled low. Your sister's that Erica Carter? Pulitzer finalist, investigative shark, and pain in the ass since age 12. Darnell grinned. Then let's build a fire big enough she can see it from DC. He stood and offered a hand. Welcome to the Silent Wing, Doc. Naomi shook it, and for the first time in hours, maybe days, she felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. Inside the dim break room, Naomi Carter sat hunched over a scratched plastic table, the glow of her backup phone lighting her face. Across from her, Darnell connected his work tablet to an old router, rerouting signals through a VPN that bounced data off servers in Canada, Iceland, and back. They won't be able to trace this for a while, he muttered. At least long enough to light a fire. Naomi nodded, her fingers tapping with surgeon-like precision. She opened the secure folder her sister had built into the burner phone's OS, encrypted, camera-ready, with one function, go viral. One click. The video uploaded in silence. No filters, no edits, just raw truth. Naomi being ignored, scalded, dismissed, escorted. The murmurs of quota captured outside the holding room. Her firm, level voice stating her credentials, her purpose, and the consequences of her removal. She added a caption. I was removed from United Flight 2765 for asking for water in first class because I was uncomfortable because I'm black. Here's what systemic discrimination looks like. Hashtag Air Justice. Now, Jet the Silent Wing. She hit post. The video launched on 6 platforms simultaneously. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Threads, each using her verified backup accounts tied to her sister's network. Erica had set it up just in case. The first view hit within 20 seconds. By the time Naomi leaned back in her chair, it had crossed 1,000. Beside her, Darnell cracked open the file folder and selected a series of documents. Ready to move our side? Naomi nodded. It's time. He tapped out a series of messages on a group chat app called JetNet, used internally among staff for shift swaps and casual memos. Only this thread had been hidden under the name Lunchroom Menu, April, for over 2 years. When he hit send, a cascade of attachments launched into motion. Across the airport, cell phones buzzed. Screens lit up. Files exploded into dozens of inboxes, many of them reporters, regulators, and watchdog organizations. Cabin balancing spreadsheets. Internal memos referencing optic-sensitive passengers. Coded instructions to gate agents about profile balancing. A presentation slide with the words Comfort Threshold Index in bold, overlaid with statistics showing decreased first-class satisfaction when minority occupancy exceeds 30%. The evidence was no longer quiet. It was screaming. Naomi's heart pounded, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Finally, the silence was cracking. She stood up, pacing the room. "Erica just replied," she said, holding up her phone. "Already trending. Uploading to national press contacts now. Major civil rights orgs sharing. Sit tight." Darnell smiled. "It's starting." Then a knock. A sharp, deliberate knock against the steel break room door. Naomi and Darnell both turned, eyes narrowing. Another knock. 3 raps. Pause. 2 raps. Darnell approached, cautiously opening the door. On the other side stood a woman in a navy pantsuit, her badge lanyard flipped backward. She had the calm bearing of someone who knew how to enter a room without drawing fire. "Zoe?" Darnell asked. The woman stepped in, flipping her ID badge around. It read, "Zoe Matthews, lead flight attendant, Polaris Air." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "That's not United." "It's their competitor," Zoe replied, lowering her voice. "But the cancer runs deep." Darnell closed the door behind her. "You sure about this?" Zoe nodded and pulled a small thumb drive from her blazer pocket. "I've been documenting similar practices for almost 2 years. Profile tags, reassignment algorithms, internal memos disguised as passenger wellness metrics." She placed the drive on the table. "I want this out as badly as you do." Naomi picked up the drive, examining it. "Why now?" Zoe met her gaze. "Because I saw your video 10 minutes ago, and I realized, if I keep waiting for the right time, there will never be one." Naomi smiled. "Welcome to the Silent Wing." Darnell raised an eyebrow. "This makes it bigger than just United." "It already was," Zoe said. "We just didn't know how to prove it." They uploaded Zoe's files, labeled carefully in folders like Diversity Summary Reports and Board-Level Proposals. Together, the data painted a damning portrait that across multiple major airlines, passengers of color were being tracked, sorted, and selectively discouraged from premium experiences. Every part of the passenger journey, from check-in to lounge access to cabin assignments, was being manipulated by internal metrics with euphemisms like Customer Atmosphere Index and Visual Balance Ratios. It wasn't just systemic, it was strategic. Naomi's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Erica calling directly. Naomi put her on speaker. "Naomi, you just cracked 500,000 views. CNN just ran a lower third headline with your name. I've got 3 anchors texting me for interviews." Naomi felt her knees weaken, not from fear, but from awe. "It's happening." "Yes, but it's moving fast. The airline's already spinning. They're calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding, blaming individual staff." "Of course they are. You need more voices, more validation." Naomi turned to Darnell and Zoe. "Can we get more employees to speak out?" Darnell nodded. "Some are waiting for the green light. Give us an hour." Zoe added, "And some passengers too, ones with stories, ones who've been quiet for years." Naomi gripped the edge of the table. "No more quiet," she said. Erica's voice crackled through the speaker. "We need a name, a rallying cry, something people can unify around." Naomi glanced at the screen where her face had frozen mid-sentence in the thumbnail of the viral video. Then she looked up, eyes burning. "Call it the Circle," she said. "Because this isn't a solo fight. It's collective, unbreakable, a line of resistance that loops back to protect everyone inside." There was silence. Then Erica said softly, "Perfect. Let's get to work." A low hum vibrated through the maintenance corridor as Naomi Carter watched Darnell and Zoe sync Maya's comms kit to the airport's PA override system. The room was full now. 8 other Silent Wing members had arrived. A baggage handler, 2 TSA officers, a pair of gate agents, and an off-duty pilot in civilian clothes. All of them carried the same look in their eyes. Focus edged with fear, but ignited by purpose. Maya, barely 27, sat at the center of the chaos like the conductor of an orchestra, her fingers dancing across her tablet. "They haven't locked me out yet," she whispered. "Looks like they still think I'm just a comms assistant." She smirked, then straightened. "Ready?" Naomi nodded. Maya tapped one button. The chime echoed through the entire terminal. 3 notes that signaled an important announcement was coming. Then silence. Then Maya's voice, clear, firm, and broadcast through every speaker in Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Attention all passengers, this is not a routine message. Travelers paused mid-stride. Parents stopped mid-diaper change. Businessmen looked up from laptops. The terminal, a hive of constant motion, slowed. If you have ever been pulled aside, detained, ignored, downgraded, or treated with suspicion during your time in this airport, if you've ever wondered whether it was because of your name, your accent, your skin color, your clothing, then we invite you to speak. Naomi's chest tightened. We are gathering in Concourse B, Central Atrium. Your stories matter. The cameras are here now. The world is listening. Maya clicked off. Silence returned, heavy, expectant. And then the foot traffic shifted. From their surveillance screens, the silent wing could see it. Streams of passengers changing direction, heading toward Concourse B. People from every background. Black, Middle Eastern, South Asian, Latinx, Indigenous. Men in suits. Mothers with strollers. Students with backpacks. The terminal buzzed as security scrambled to interpret what was happening. Within 10 minutes, the atrium filled. Within 20, it overflowed. Zoe handed Naomi a small mic and mobile speaker, the kind used by tour guides and field reporters. Naomi stepped up onto a low ledge at the center of the space. Around her, cameras began to appear. First phones, then press crews, then live streamers with handheld gimbals. She cleared her throat and began. "My name is Dr. Naomi Carter," she said, voice magnified through the impromptu system. "This morning, I was removed from my flight after requesting water in first class. I was called disruptive. I was detained without cause. I was on my way to perform emergency surgery on the son of a sitting governor." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I say this not to gain sympathy," Naomi continued, "but to show you how fragile privilege is for people who look like me. No amount of rank, respect, or credentials protects us when prejudice walks unchecked." She paused. The crowd stood motionless. If you've experienced something similar here or anywhere, we invite you to speak. A young man stepped forward first, nervous, clutching his boarding pass. "My name is Raj. I was pulled aside 3 separate times this morning. I was told it was random." He glanced at the cameras. "It's never random." A middle-aged black woman stepped up next. "Delta agent told me my ticket looked forged. I'm platinum status." Then a Latino father. "They searched my 9-year-old daughter's hair." One by one, voices rose. Each story a mirror to the next. Naomi watched, her heart clenching, as decades of humiliation poured into the open air. Then, twist. A man pushed through the crowd, dressed in a plain gray sweatshirt and airport security badge. He looked to be in his early 40s, Latino, broad-shouldered, and walking with a slight limp. He stared at Naomi for a long moment. "Ma'am," he said, voice low but carrying. "I know you." She tilted her head, puzzled. "You don't remember me," he added. "But I remember you. Kandahar, FOB Rhino, winter of 2010. You were the surgeon. I was medevaced with a ruptured spleen. You saved my life." A stunned silence fell over the atrium. Naomi's breath hitched. It was starting to come back, blurred memories of sand, blood, and tension. The young soldier with the shredded flak jacket, the emergency table, the field unit with no backup. "You remembered my face?" she asked softly. He nodded, eyes damp. "You didn't just save me. You stayed until I could walk. You brought me back." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. The cameras zoomed in. The man turned to the assembly. "This woman fought to keep me alive in a war zone. And today, in her own country, she gets pulled off a plane for asking for water?" Outrage rippled through the gathering like a thunderclap. The moment shifted. This was no longer just a protest. It was a reckoning. Dozens of hands went up. Voices layered over one another. A rhythm built, not of chanting, but of truth. Zoe relayed that online streams were peaking. Over 2 million views. Civil rights organizations were tweeting in support. National politicians were retweeting the footage. Maya rushed to Naomi, tablet shaking in her hands. ABC News, CNN, MSNBC. They're all asking for live interviews. Fox too, though probably with different intentions. Naomi nodded. Not yet. Let the people speak. From her elevated perch, she scanned the faces in the crowd. Some crying, some angry, some stunned, silent, but all awake now. This was what oppression feared most. Not rage, but clarity. Not one person yelling, but many speaking in unison. Naomi stepped down from the ledge and walked into the crowd. Hands reached out to her, some to shake, some to hold. A woman pressed a thank you note into her palm. A boy gave her his drawing of an airplane with hearts around it. Her chest ached, not from defeat, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Across the terminal, Darnell's voice crackled through a walkie. They're locking elevators. We've got about 15 minutes before they try to shut this down. Naomi turned to Maya and whispered, Time for phase 2. The air in the concourse crackled with energy. It wasn't chaos. It was coordination. Naomi Carter stood at the center of the crowd, now several hundred strong, many holding handwritten signs, some made from napkins, others from torn paper bags and crumpled boarding passes. Words scrawled in thick marker read, Dignity doesn't fly standby. Systemic, not isolated. We deserve first-class treatment too. Maya handed Naomi a secure radio, linked to a closed network of sympathetic airport employees. The tablet in her other hand showed footage from every major news outlet now circling the story. The silent wing had gained traction, but now came the real test. Naomi looked at Darnell, whose face was calm but firm. Are you sure we're ready for this? He gave a small nod. We don't get a second shot at history. Zoe stepped up beside them. Security's already mobilizing. If we're going to move, it has to be now. Naomi turned to the crowd and raised the portable mic again. I know many of you are tired, frustrated. Some of you are scared. I don't blame you, but this moment, right here, this is where it shifts. She paused, eyes scanning the sea of faces. There's one place at this airport they cannot ignore. One place that stops the money, stops the planes, stops the world if we take it. A hush fell over the atrium. Naomi took a breath. We're walking to the tarmac. Gasps, murmurs. Someone whispered, Is that legal? Someone else answered, Doesn't matter anymore. We are not storming, Naomi clarified. We are walking, peacefully, purposefully. And if anyone wants to stay here and continue sharing stories, please do. Every voice matters. But if you're ready to be seen, really seen, then walk with us. A hand went up, then another, then a wave. One by one, people stepped forward. I'll go. I'm in. My grandfather marched in Selma. This is mine. Within moments, 50 volunteers assembled. Not young radicals or seasoned activists, but travelers, grandmothers, off-duty nurses, a man in a three-piece suit, a teen in a hijab clutching her boarding pass like a badge. Naomi took the lead. They moved through the terminal, escorted by members of the silent wing who disabled security turnstiles and opened maintenance corridors. Darnell led them through a back hallway, bypassing TSA checkpoints. Zoe keyed in override codes that only supervisors should know. Maya monitored security chatter on her tablet, whispering updates through the radio. We have 10 minutes before they reroute guards. Runway access door is clear. The corridor narrowed, dimmer now, walls lined with insulation and exposed wiring. The hum of turbines grew louder. At the end of the hall stood a heavy blast-proof door labeled Authorized Personnel Only, Airside Access. Naomi turned to the group. Once we step through, everything changes. No one has to come. No one will be blamed if they turn back now. No one moved. Then, the teen in the hijab stepped forward. They can't ignore us all. Zoe swiped her stolen clearance badge. The light flashed green. The door groaned open. Blinding sunlight spilled in. The heat hit first, a wall of Georgia summer rising off the concrete. Beyond them, the runway stretched like an ocean of asphalt, shimmering with jet fuel haze. Planes taxied in the distance, their engines a low mechanical roar. The group moved in tight formation, like a living artery threading toward the heart of the system. Within 2 minutes, alarms blared from the tower. Unauthorized access. Runway incursion. Naomi didn't flinch. She walked calmly to the center line of a service road running parallel to runway 8R, the same strip where United Flight 2765 would have taken off. She turned. Form the line. The 50 volunteers linked arms, shoulder to shoulder, forming a wide human barrier across the path. Darnell stood on Naomi's right, Zoe on her left. Media helicopters buzzed in the distance. Terminal windows filled with onlookers. Passengers pressing hands to glass, phones recording, mouths open in awe. And then the next twist came, not from the ground, but the air. Maya's voice came through the radio, trembling with shock. You're not going to believe this. Listen to tower chatter. She patched through an open channel feed. Atlanta Tower, this is Delta 309 requesting runway 9R instead. We won't fly over the protest. Another voice. Copy that, Delta. American 127, holding pattern. Do you confirm reroute? A pause. Then, confirmed. We stand with the protest. Naomi's jaw dropped. Zoe blinked. Are they refusing to fly? Some of them are, Maya confirmed. Flight crews, pilots, ground marshals. I think it's spreading. Then Maya sent a live update to Naomi's phone. A group of United pilots had just sent a statement to national media outlets, anonymously signed, "We refuse to fly for a company that punishes those who speak up. We stand with Dr. Carter and every silenced passenger. #grounded in justice." The tide had shifted again. It wasn't just passengers anymore. It wasn't just internal staff. Now, the very people who operated the system were stepping away from the controls. Naomi's phone buzzed. A message from Erica. You just hit 5 million views. CEO Garrison is in the air right now. His plane is being rerouted. They're scrambling. Hold the line. Naomi lowered the phone, her throat tight with emotion. Zoe looked at her. Are you okay? Naomi nodded, barely. I've waited my whole life for this kind of silence, she whispered. The kind that comes right before change. The tarmac vibrated under Naomi's feet. It wasn't from the engines of taxiing planes, nor from the rhythmic thrum of helicopters circling overhead. It was the weight of tension, dense, electric, and ready to snap. She stood at the front of the human chain, 50 people wide, facing a phalanx of airport security and armed response teams. Riot helmets gleamed in the sun. Shields reflected distorted images of protest signs and upraised hands. Red dots from laser sights danced across chests and shoulders. A voice shouted through a megaphone. You are trespassing on federally controlled airspace. Disperse immediately, or you will be arrested. No one moved. Naomi's pulse was steady, but the heat made her dizzy. Sweat pooled beneath her collar. Her burn from earlier had reopened beneath the layers of clothing, sending sharp jabs up her thigh. Still, she didn't flinch. Zoe leaned slightly toward her. They're waiting for one person to make a mistake. Naomi nodded. Then we give them nothing. Behind her, Darnell whispered into his walkie. Media feed still strong. Overhead cam is live. CNN, MSNBC, and at least 5 independent channels. Naomi stared straight ahead, meeting the gaze of the commander behind the front line of guards. His expression was unreadable, but his posture said everything. Stand down or be crushed. A second megaphone crackled. This is your final warning. Return to designated terminals or face use of force. One of the volunteers, a middle-aged woman with silver braids, swayed slightly in the heat. Naomi reached to steady her, the contact brief but grounding. A child in the second row began to cry softly. His mother hushed him with a whisper. You're brave. We're all brave. A ripple moved through the crowd, but no one stepped back. Then, without warning, a new figure emerged from the security line. A young man in a reflective vest stepped forward. His hands were raised, palms out. The name on his badge, T. Hernandez, gleamed in the sun. He reached to his chest, gripped his ID, and yanked. The lanyard snapped, fluttering to the ground. Gasps rippled through both sides. Another security worker followed, then a third. Each stepped forward slowly, deliberately, pulling off their identification, tossing aside their access cards. The commander barked something through his radio, but the movement couldn't be stopped. Within seconds, a full dozen employees had crossed the invisible threshold. Uniformed TSA, gate supervisors, even a runway marshal. They stood between Naomi's group and the armed response line. Then they linked arms. Naomi stared, stunned. Twist. Zoe's voice caught in her throat. "They're defecting." "They're choosing," Naomi corrected softly. More followed. A man from the security line threw down his baton and walked forward, stripping off his gear as he joined the circle. Then a woman, her eyes shining with tears, placed her riot helmet gently on the ground and crossed over it. The commander shouted something unintelligible. The line of guards began to falter. A sound broke through the tension. Not an alarm, not a voice, but applause. From the terminal windows behind them, thousands of onlookers had begun clapping, pounding glass, cheering. Naomi turned. The entire concourse had become a stage. Passengers waving handmade signs, filming on phones, some simply pressing their hands to the windows in solidarity. Her radio buzzed. Maya's voice, urgent. "Tower just confirmed. Runway traffic is frozen. FAA put a hold on all inbound landings until this is resolved. That means CEO Garrison's plane is stuck in a holding pattern above ATL. He's circling, watching." Naomi looked to the sky. Somewhere up there, in first class, the man responsible for years of curated discrimination was watching his empire teeter on the edge. Naomi raised her mic again. Her voice was quiet, but the speaker carried it over the runway like wind. "Today, we don't stand against America. We stand for what it's supposed to mean." She paused. "We aren't here to burn anything down. We're here to build something better, with truth, with evidence, with unity." She turned slightly, addressing the security team that hadn't yet crossed over. "You were trained to protect order. But what happens when the system you're guarding is broken? What happens when silence causes harm?" Another uniform moved. Then another. It wasn't a stampede. It wasn't chaos. It was a moral gravity. And the weight was shifting. Naomi's radio buzzed again. Erica's voice this time. 6 million views, trending in 13 countries. CNN just cut to a full broadcast. They're calling it "The Line Heard Round the World." Naomi lowered the mic. Her eyes closed for a moment. In her mind, she saw her father, telling her as a child that courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just staying when you wanted to run. The air around her seemed to quiet. Then the rumble came again. This time, not from security. From behind. From the side gates. From the terminal doors, now pushed open by airport staff who had disabled internal locks. Hundreds more were joining. Employees from airlines, catering crews, ground staff, off-duty workers who had seen the live stream on break and rushed back. It wasn't 50 anymore. It was thousands. Forming not one, but many lines, wrapping the runway like a cord of resistance. Naomi turned slowly, looking around. This wasn't a protest. It was a transformation, a groundswell, and it was just beginning. The roar of helicopter blades grew louder, chopping the thick August air into violent gusts that whipped Naomi's curls across her face. She didn't flinch. The protest line held firm. Thousands of bodies forming concentric rings around the tarmac. Phones recorded, media drones hovered. The world was watching. From the south end of runway 8R, a matte black helicopter descended. Its landing gear touched down with the delicacy of a spider, though every inch of it radiated corporate aggression. The door opened. Out stepped Thomas Garrison, CEO of United Skies Airlines, architect of the Customer Excellence PR initiative, and the man whose decisions had quietly sanctioned a culture of racial exclusion for years. He was dressed for the cameras, navy suit, crisp white shirt, red power tie. His silver hair was immaculately combed. His posture was that of a man who expected the world to bend when he spoke. Not today. Naomi stood with her shoulders squared. Waiting, behind her, Darnell, Zoe, Maya, and the rest of the silent wing stood like sentinels. 2 aides flanked Garrison. One carried a briefcase. The other whispered frantically into an earpiece, likely updating him on the media firestorm unfolding in real time. Garrison approached Naomi directly, flanked by a trio of airport security guards who looked deeply uncomfortable. He extended a hand. "Dr. Carter," he said smoothly. "Let's talk." Naomi didn't take the hand. "Talk here," she replied. He glanced around. "Perhaps somewhere less charged. We can find a private space." She gave him a look that could slice steel. "You had your private space. You used it to bury this problem. Now the problem is standing in front of you, and it's not going anywhere." Garrison exhaled through his nose, trying to maintain composure. "I understand emotions are high, but this situation can still be de-escalated. We're prepared to offer you a personal apology, and..." Naomi's voice cut in like a scalpel. "This isn't about me. This is about everyone who was told they didn't belong in first class. Everyone who was humiliated, detained, downgraded, and dismissed because of the way they looked." He gestured toward the growing circle of cameras. "You're turning this into a circus." She smiled coldly. "No, I'm turning it into history." The crowd erupted in cheers. The line didn't break. It strengthened. Garrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Off the record, we're prepared to settle. First-class status for life, a public statement of regret, and a charitable donation in your name." Naomi tilted her head. "You think I can be bought?" "I think," he said, voice tightening, "that you're playing a dangerous game." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "The only thing dangerous here is unchecked power, and I've seen what that looks like." She reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a weathered folder. The material was military-grade Kevlar fiber, the kind used in field operations. She flipped it open. Inside was a collection of sealed clearance tags, combat deployment credentials, and an official commendation from the Department of Defense, stamped in red. Top secret. Declassified. She handed it to Garrison without flinching. He glanced down and froze. His aide leaned in, lips parting in disbelief. "This document," Garrison said slowly, "this confirms you were the lead medical commander for Operation Sentinel Echo?" Naomi nodded. "Afghanistan, 2010. I coordinated triage for over 400 wounded in under 36 hours during a mass casualty event." He looked up. "You're the Naomi Carter?" "I was never just a doctor on a plane," she said. "But you didn't ask. You assumed." "Twist," Maya whispered into Naomi's earpiece. "CNN just got wind of the dossier. They're calling it the General in Coach." The hashtag #Sentinel Carter exploded online within minutes. Military vets began sharing photos, stories, commendations. Dozens of soldiers, medics, and officers stepped forward to confirm what Garrison was now holding in his shaking hands. Naomi Carter wasn't just a doctor. She was a battlefield legend. And now, she was the face of a movement. The CEO's composure cracked. For the first time, he looked like a man out of air. Naomi stepped forward, her voice low enough only for him to hear. "You treated me like a problem to be contained. But I was trained to lead in chaos, to hold lives in my hands under fire. What makes you think I'd flinch now?" Garrison looked past her, toward the cameras, toward the growing crowd of employees who had removed their uniforms and joined the protest, toward the media vans ringing the perimeter. He saw the tide had turned. Naomi handed the folder back to Maya, then turned back to Garrison. "No backroom deal, no scripted apology. You face the people, and you face the truth, out loud, right now." His aide stepped in. "Sir, if we retreat, this story gets worse. But if we concede..." Naomi raised her voice, cutting through the muttering. "This company has run on silence and suppression. Today, we end that. You don't get to control the narrative anymore. We do." The crowd erupted again, louder this time. Garrison looked down at the tarmac, his polished shoes now coated in dust. Then he looked back up at Naomi. "You've made your point." No, she said. We've made ours. Behind her, the human chain held firm. In front of her, power finally flinched. Naomi Carter stood with her back straight, microphone gripped firmly in her left hand. The sky above the tarmac was a blinding canvas of heat and high noon sun, but the air buzzed colder than any winter war zone she'd stood in. Power had shifted. The world knew it. Thomas Garrison, CEO of United Skies, had retreated a half step, physically and metaphorically. The folder with Naomi's military dossier still trembled in his hands. His press aide whispered frantically, holding a phone up to his ear. His face was pale, not from heat stroke, but from reputational hemorrhage. Naomi turned slightly to face the cameras, now numbering in the dozens. Drones floated above like curious wasps. Maya's live stream counter ticked upward in real time. 19.3 million views, 19.7 million, 20.1 million. Naomi raised the mic, her voice low and clear. This isn't a standoff anymore. It's a reckoning. She paused. The silence between her words was as loud as the crowd's anticipation. We're not here to disrupt. We're here to restore. And to do that, we have 3 demands. The words carried across the tarmac, over the cameras, through every live stream, into living rooms, airport lounges, and headlines. First, she said, United Skies Airlines must issue a public, on-record acknowledgement of systemic discriminatory practices within their organization, at every level. No more euphemisms, no more phrases like isolated incidents or misunderstandings. Name it, racism, discrimination, policy-enabled prejudice. A murmur rippled through the line. Naomi didn't stop. Second, a full independent audit of all operational protocols, hiring, ticketing, seating, security. The findings must be public. The reform plan must be binding. The reporters started scribbling faster. Third, she said, pausing for effect. Complete immunity and protection for every employee, contractor, and protest participant who stepped forward today. No retaliation, no terminations, no blacklisting. She let the words settle like dust after a battle. Then, without these 3 guarantees, we hold the line. Indefinitely. Cameras clicked. Phones buzzed. Tweets flew. The pressure built like a wave at sea. Naomi turned slightly, looking at Garrison. His mouth was a tight line. You're threatening an entire industry with shutdown. Naomi held his gaze. We're offering a lifeline before it sinks itself. A nearby reporter shouted, Dr. Carter, are you speaking on behalf of a union or advocacy group? Naomi turned to the crowd. I speak for passengers. I speak for every crew member too afraid to report what they've seen, for every child who's been pulled aside, every grandmother who's been talked down to. This isn't politics. It's dignity. The clapping started, soft at first, from the terminal windows, then louder, from inside the protest circle, and soon it echoed across the runway like applause in a stadium. Then came the twist. Maya's tablet pinged with a high-priority notification. Her eyes widened. She rushed to Naomi. You're not going to believe this. Naomi arched an eyebrow. Try me. Maya held up the screen. On it, a breaking news alert scrolled in bold letters. White House issues statement. Presidential Civil Rights Task Force en route to Atlanta to oversee airline protest resolution. Naomi blinked. What? Zoe leaned in. They just sent a federal delegation? Yup, Maya confirmed. 4 members of the Department of Transportation, 2 from the Office of Civil Rights, and a deputy press secretary. Landing at ATL in less than an hour. Twist 10, delivered. Naomi exhaled sharply. That means they're not just watching. Darnell grinned. They're scared it might spread, Zoe added. This isn't just your moment anymore, it's everybody's. Naomi turned back toward Garrison, who now looked like he was aging and fast forward. His phone buzzed again. His aide mouthed something. The board. Maya's earpiece crackled. Multiple airlines issuing solidarity statements, Delta, JetBlue, even Air France. They're distancing themselves from United. Then another ding. Maya's eyes went wide. Stock's down 18% in the last 3 hours. Garrison looked up from his phone, voice tight. You're tanking my company. Naomi stepped forward. No, Mr. Garrison, your company tanked itself. We're just shining a light on it. Another aide rushed to his side. We need a statement now, something strong, reassuring. Garrison looked at Naomi, then at the crowd, then at the cameras. He was calculating, cornered, and out of corporate choreography. Naomi raised the mic one more time. We are not here to humiliate, she said, but we will not be gaslit. The evidence is on the screen. The stories are recorded. The pain is documented. The only question left is, what are you going to do about it? Behind her, a projection screen, rigged by Maya's team, flickered to life. On it, screenshots of internal airline emails cycled, seating algorithms with coded language, TSA profiles linked to racial indicators, staff complaints that were ignored. The evidence was undeniable, and the world saw it all. The helicopters swirled above. The delegation jet was already descending toward a nearby private runway. The cameras stayed trained on Naomi, the woman who'd walked off a plane and into a movement. Thomas Garrison looked at the line of protesters, some sunburned, some exhausted, all unflinching. Then he looked at Naomi. We'll draft the statement, he said at last, voice hoarse. Naomi nodded. And you'll read it. Not your team, not your spokesperson, you. He hesitated, then nodded again. The deal had not been struck in a boardroom. It had been struck on asphalt, under a punishing sun, in front of millions. Naomi lowered the mic. Behind her, the protesters didn't cheer. They simply stood taller. The tarmac had never seen such silence. It wasn't the absence of noise. It was the collective breath held between history and whatever would come next. The heat shimmered across the concrete, distorting shadows of reporters, employees, passengers, and protesters alike. Overhead, drones hovered. Network cameras rolled. And at the center of it all, under a makeshift canopy hastily erected by airport staff, stood a folding table with 3 documents, 2 pens, and 1 final decision. Thomas Garrison adjusted his cufflinks, though they were already perfect. His face betrayed the exhaustion of someone used to control, now forced to relinquish it under unrelenting global scrutiny. The White House task force stood beside him, stone-faced, having arrived only minutes earlier to witness, not advise. Naomi Carter stood across from him, arms crossed, posture calm but unbending. Darnell, Maya, and Zoe flanked her like bookends of justice. Behind them, the protest lines remained, some seated now, many dehydrated, but all holding fast. The agreement had been drafted under federal observation, with input from civil rights lawyers flown in mid-protest. The language was specific, binding, and publicly recorded. Clause 1. Formal admission of systemic discriminatory practices within United Skies Airlines. Clause 2. Immediate commencement of an independent audit with full transparency and media oversight. Clause 3. Legal protection for all protesters, employees, and whistleblowers involved. No redactions, no settlements in silence. A press microphone crackled nearby. This is Thomas Garrison, CEO of United Skies, he began, voice flatter than his usual media-trained charm. I am here today to acknowledge the failures of our company in upholding principles of equity and dignity for all passengers. He paused, his throat tightening. We failed our customers, we failed our staff, and we failed the ideals we claim to represent. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. Garrison looked down at the agreement. His hand trembled slightly as he took the pen. Click. With a single signature, the weight of denial collapsed. The dam broke. Applause rippled. Not thunderous, not celebratory, but firm. Affirming. Like the low hum of a heartbeat returning after a rest. Reporters surged forward. Cameras clicked like automatic fire. Someone shouted, "Dr. Carter, do you have a response?" Naomi stepped up to the mic. "This moment is not a victory," she said. "It's a beginning. The acknowledgement of harm is not justice, but it's the first brick on the path toward it. She inhaled deeply, her voice softening. No piece of paper can undo years of pain, profiling, or silence, but it can be a promise, and we will hold them to it. As she turned to step back, another voice cut through the static. A scream. "Help! Someone! He's collapsing!" Naomi's head snapped toward the sound. About 20 yards away, a man, elderly, white hair matted to his forehead, had crumpled to the ground. His protest sign had dropped beside him. He clutched his chest, gasping. The crowd surged, parting around him in panic. Naomi didn't hesitate. The mic fell from her hand, thudding against the ground. She was already moving, breaking from the stage, sprinting across the blistering tarmac. "Get me space!" she shouted, dropping to her knees beside the man. Maya radioed for paramedics, but Naomi knew they'd take too long. She checked his pulse, rapid, thready, skin pale, sweating heavily. Classic signs. "Heat stroke with possible cardiac distress," she barked. "I need water, cloth, anything." Darnell tossed her his bottled water. Zoe dropped her scarf. Naomi doused it and pressed it to the man's neck and forehead. He wheezed. His lips moved. "Can't breathe. You're okay," Naomi said, her voice firm but calm. "You're not alone. Stay with me." Hands reached in, someone shielding her from the sun, another lifting the man's legs to help blood flow to his brain. Maya whispered to a nearby cameraman, "Keep filming. The world needs to see this." And they did. The live stream didn't cut to commercial. It stayed on Naomi, knees bruised, blouse soaked, hands steady over the chest of a stranger who had believed in her message enough to stand for hours in the sun. Garrison watched from the podium, stunned. His PR aide whispered, "We need to spin this somehow." Garrison shook his head. "You don't spin that. You get out of the way." Minutes later, paramedics arrived. Naomi briefed them rapidly, handed off her impromptu patient, and stood back. She was shaking now, not from fear, but from the sheer gravity of the moment. She turned, and the entire tarmac, the crowd, the press, the delegation, stood in stunned silence. Then came the slow, steady applause. Not for show, for truth. Naomi picked up the mic she had dropped earlier. It was scuffed, like her. "I'm a protester, but I'm a doctor first." She wiped her brow. "No matter how public this gets, no matter how powerful this movement becomes, I will never forget why I got on that plane in the first place. It was to save a life." She looked toward the horizon. And that mission hasn't changed. 6 months later, the skies looked different. Inside the grand ballroom of the National Aviation Policy Summit in Washington, D.C., a sea of Navy suits, polished heels, and glossy name badges filled the hall. Airline executives, regulators, civil rights advocates, reporters, lobbyists. Some came curious, some came nervous. Most came because they had no choice. On the central stage, behind a sleek podium bearing the seal of the United States Department of Transportation, stood Dr. Naomi Carter. Her hair was pulled back into a neat twist. Her blazer bore the insignia of the United States Commission for Air Justice, a brand new federal body born from protest, pressure, and the fire of a runway that had once been shut down by truth. She cleared her throat, glancing once at the rows of familiar faces. Darnell in the third row, now Director of Airport Ethics Training. Zoe beside him, representing the International Flight Attendants Union. Maya seated up front, with her ever-present tablet and a new title, Chief of Digital Transparency, FAA Advisory Council. 6 months ago, Naomi began, many of you told me change would be slow, that it would take years, decades maybe, to alter something as massive as the air travel industry. She paused. They were wrong. A ripple of polite laughter spread through the room, but underneath it, respect. In the last quarter alone, she continued, complaints of racial profiling at TSA checkpoints are down 67%. Incidents of random seat reassignments for passengers of color have dropped by 81%, and for the first time, every major U.S. airline now publishes quarterly equity audits. Behind her, the projection screen displayed a live dashboard. Numbers, charts, real-time updates from airports nationwide. Transparency is not a threat, Naomi said. It's a mirror, one that shows us what we value and who we leave behind. She closed the tablet on the podium. Today, the Commission for Air Justice announces our newest initiative, the Passenger Equity Bill of Rights, a binding charter that guarantees protection, dignity, and recourse for every traveler, regardless of appearance, language, or name. The applause this time was not polite. It was thunderous. As she stepped down from the stage, reporters surged forward, hands raised. Naomi waved them off gently. Not today. Today isn't about press. It's about presence. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the Washington skyline, Naomi sat quietly inside Gate C-12 of Reagan National Airport. Her flight home to Boston was delayed by 30 minutes. She didn't mind. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing to an operating room or walking into battle. She was just moving forward. When boarding was called, she walked down the jet bridge alone, badge tucked away, coat folded over her arm. As she stepped into the first-class cabin of United Flight 1023, a flight attendant greeted her. A young black woman, neat bun, soft eyes. Her name tag read, A. Green. She smiled. Genuine, not trained. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Carter," she said. "We've been expecting you." Naomi blinked. The attendant gestured to seat 1A. "We made sure it was your favorite spot." Naomi settled in, still slightly overwhelmed. Another attendant arrived, placing a small card on her tray table. Handwritten, no logos. "Thank you for not just changing the system, but for reminding us what dignity looks like in real time." The crew. As the final passengers boarded, Naomi looked around. The cabin was diverse. Age, background, language. The old invisible rules, the comfort algorithms, and demographic caps were gone. The flight crew completed their checks. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Welcome aboard United Flight 1023. Today, you're flying on a new kind of airline, one where your presence is not a variable, but a value." Naomi's chest tightened. The captain continued, "If at any point during this flight you feel you've been treated unfairly, we want to hear about it, because silence no longer flies here." As the aircraft began its slow taxi toward the runway, Naomi leaned her head back. Out the window, she saw a single line of paint running across the asphalt, bright white, perfectly straight. She smiled. In her mind, it stretched backward. 6 months, 1,000 decisions, a single spilled cup of coffee, and forward, toward something better. Just before takeoff, a final figure approached. It was the lead attendant again. She knelt slightly beside Naomi's seat and whispered, "Not for the cameras, not for PR, just for her. Welcome back, Dr. Carter." She paused, eyes wet with gratitude. "Thank you." The wheels lifted, and for once, Naomi let herself rest.